But thanks to Christine for putting this together. I'm super excited to be here, and to AIGA for having us. I'm really flattered to be on this panel with this amazing people. I'm like a big fan of all their work, so I'm a little intimidated, to be honest. But yeah, as Christine said, I'm a graphic designer, and lately I've been doing book cover design, lettering, and some type design. And throughout my career, I've been kind of like trying to focus on finding who am I as a designer, and find my place in the design world. And starting with moving to New York, I feel like it was a big, important move for me. I graduated in 2008, and 2 weeks after, I moved to like the biggest city, most competitive place in the world in the middle of a recession. So it was pretty intimidating, but I was super excited to get started and work and find what to do. So I was kind of imagining this, dream job where I would have a mentor, and I would have this cool office, and I would be working all night and doing these amazing projects, and just super excited to be there. And it takes a while to get there, and I feel like I still haven't found that 9 years after, but I'm getting there somehow. So at the same time, I was trying to figure out who I was as a designer, what did I want to communicate, why was I making the work that I was making, how can I show my work in ways that are exciting to people, and trying to find my voice, which I'm sure most of you guys are also doing or have done at some point in your careers. And at that time, everything felt really up in the air for me. And I felt a little like, I don't know, why am I here? Why am I doing the things that I'm doing? But it was really cool to be there because I'm originally from Venezuela. I was born in New York, but I was raised in Venezuela. So I went to school there, and I was exposed to many things. The graphic design there was very much typographic and very Bauhausy. A lot of people emigrated to Venezuela in the 50s after the war, and they were doing a very traditional minimalist design. And I was really, really excited about that when I first moved to New York, and I was kind of encountering this other styles. So I saw the work of Milton Glaser and Seymour Schwartz at Pushpin Graphic. I also was exposed to things like Llewellyn and his amazing crew of people, Tom Carnace, Tony Dispigna, doing like crazy lettering that was like really pushing the envelope. And I also rediscovered artists like Jean-Michel Basquiat, Nancy Twombly, whose approach to handwriting was, pretty expressive. And I started noticing the work of people like Wayne White and Espo, who embraced street art to create their own visual language. So it was a lot of, a lot of things that I was seeing that were really changing the way I saw design. And I think being exposed to all those things also like stayed in my head in a certain way, and was there like waiting to come out. And, I really felt like if I wanted to have something to do with type and lettering, that was the place to be right then and there, and it was the right time to do it. So the most tangible way for me to process all these changes and, the next step was to go into Type at Cooper. That was a recently launched program in typeface design. So in 2011, I started studying there. And the first project was to create a revival. So we would pick a source design, and then we would digitize it, to get acquainted with drawing type, which, like Tom was saying, it's not easy, and it's its own thing. This is my final working typeface. And then we had the main project of our class, which was creating an original typeface. So we would do a few characters by hand, and then we would digitize it. And the challenge here was to get something that was, you know, not as quirky, that could work as a system. So letters wouldn't necessarily stand out like crazily, but they could work in a word without calling too much your attention, but also keeping that charm of the original drawing. So it was really a really interesting and different process from what I've been doing so far. And this is my final typeface and how it's looking. And we wrapped up with this full family of 3 weights and 1 style. And it honestly was an enlightening process because I feel like at this point, even though in design school you learn how to use, you know, Illustrator, I didn't really know anything about drawing vectors, I realized. Like, you think you know, guys, but no. This was like, what? If I put the points here, it's so much better. Oh my God, it's crazy. It really changed how I worked as a designer, and I feel like it made me so much better. And it also made me think about the difference between typeface design and graphic design. And how, as a graphic designer, you're creating a finished piece for people, while as a type designer, you're creating a tool, so someone will use that, which is completely its own thing. It has to be foolproof and, you know, working very well. And on top of that, we had many professionals giving us workshops, which was amazing. We had people who were in the calligraphy world, lettering, and sign painting, amongst other things. So I got really excited about doing things by hand, and I feel like I learned a lot, and also I got very, very excited about trying new things and just different styles. It had become a really important part of my process, and I partnered up with a little magazine that it's called Diner Journal, and they were always needing art for their articles, so I was getting to experiment a lot with different tools, different brushes, different paint. Just like anything I could come across with, I would just try something different just to see what happened. And at that point, I felt kind of more comfortable behind, instead of being like behind the computer all the time, I kind of wanted to, you know, take a piece of paper and draw by hand, or like see what new things could come up from that. So that was a pretty exciting time for me. And a little after finishing Cooper Type, I got a job at Random House, as Christine mentioned, which was like, it felt like the reason that I had to move to New York. It's like, it found me. Oh my God, wow. So the stakes were super high. I felt like I had to impress everyone, especially myself. And I worked really hard because I wanted to make a good impression on everyone. And especially, I felt like I had a responsibility to the author. I wanted to tell their story, and you know, you get one shot to represent whatever they're saying in 300 pages. So it was a big challenge. And I just wanted to show you a little bit of my process on a day-to-day. So I would get a manuscript, usually, most of the times, and I would read it. And then I would take a lot of notes of ideas and things that were happening in the book, or things that would come up that I would think would be cool. And I would find inspiration, but kind of try to avoid to look at other books. And I was more looking into things like art or texture, color, you know, classic mood board stuff. But then I would get sketching. So either I would sketch by hand, or I would get going into finding images. A lot of times, for fiction books, you know, you need to represent it with an image, so there's a lot of image research that you have to do, and sometimes you have a person inside to do that, which is cool. And then it comes to the design part. So once you have all these pieces together, you can actually sit down and do stuff. And this point is kind of interesting to me because we actually finished most of the artworks that I'm doing. I get them to a point that they're finished. It's really rare that you can present to editors sketches. Most of them will not take them, so I end up having a lot of like killed covers, and if you see my Instagram, there's a lot of work that it's like outtakes from a cover that I did because I get to experiment a lot. And once I show my art director, we would narrow it down, show to the editor, then we would show to the other editors, the most senior editors, and the publisher, and they would be like, I don't like purple, you know, or it needs to be more commercial, and they would have a lot of feedback. And from there, we would show the author and the agent, and hopefully we would get an approved cover at the end of this long, crazy process. As I said, it's really fun for me because I get to try a lot of different things, and because it's not, you know, such an amount of work that you couldn't really explore, I end up having so many different styles. And at the end of the day, the most exciting part for me is just seeing like people have my book in their hands. You guys recognize that guy? Ah! I was like, what? And this one is like Mindy Lahiri's photo, which was cool too. But yeah, it's super cool to see your book out there, and when you go like into bookstores and stuff, it's really amazing. Just like, okay. And in that time, like this thing that one of our teachers said kept like lingering in my head. He said something like, don't try to be original when you draw. No one else has your hand and mind. It will be different because you drew it. He's like the chillest dude. And this really resonated with me. And every time I tell him that I really like what he said, he's like, it's like normal, like nothing special there. But it just made me realize that, you know, if you focus on doing your own thing, it will look like you because it is you. You know, you're putting so much in the paper that there's no way it's going to look like someone else. So I kind of focused, you know, on doing the work, and I stopped, like I said, looking at references and stuff, and allowed myself to have fun with the projects that I was doing. And I feel like that's when exciting things started to happen. And in a way, to my advantage, I was creating a lot of custom art. These are all Kill covers, by the way. But yeah, I was doing this thing, and it felt kind of like they were all connected in a way, even though they're very different. A lot of people started telling me like, oh, I saw a book cover that was yours in the bookstore, and I didn't even know it was you, and then I saw it, and I was like, yeah, it's her. That's crazy. So there's a style kind of within them, even though they're all very different. So I thought that was really cool. And I just wanted to show you a little bit of my process, but I'm going to drink some water first. I'm kind of thirsty. But yeah, I start by either, if I'm going to do something hand-lettered and I want to like bring it to a point that it's refined, because I take a lot of different approaches, I will do some thumbnails, really small. They're like this big, and I just like do some random layouts so I can like test the waters kind of with the title and the author name, and you know, sometimes we have like a tagline, a quote from the book. And if I don't do that, I will do a rough pencil sketch that will get me close to where I want to be. I ink it, and then I'll bring it into the computer and add texture and, you know, color, all that good stuff. And then when my time came to show the work that I was doing, I wanted my website to reflect all those feelings I was having for the books I was reading and was creating. So I started shooting my covers and just styling all of the work. And I did this because I noticed at the time that everyone was being very minimal. Most of the people were showing on their website like a white background with a JPEG of the work, which worked for them. But for me, it felt a little like I needed more. You know, I had read this story, like I said, that was so amazing, and I wanted to expand all of that idea into the rest. So I decided to shoot the covers, And this is kind of like what I started doing. It was also really important to me to show all the expression that was in the book, and it felt like a missed opportunity not to do this. So I wanted to represent the book as an object, which was something that it was really exciting to me that this was actually a thing that you can hold in your hand. And one of the things that I liked about books in the first place is that, you know, this is a three-dimensional thing that you have maybe in your purse or in your bag, or, you know, you're taking places. And it felt really important to me to have that. So I started doing these shoots, and it was also an excuse to show the work in a different way, but get, you know, styling and art directing and thinking about other ideas and how to have something that could connect with the work, but be different. And I also started doing a lot of photography, learning from lighting, and just an excuse to get off the computer. And after almost 3 years of learning and a lot of challenges and discoveries, it felt like I had hit a big wall, and it was the corporate wall. It was really hard to grow in this job. A lot of people stay there because it's such a great, comfy job. Creatively, it was amazing, so it was like nowhere to go up, you know? My responsibilities were the same, and even though I was taking books that were challenging, I felt like I needed a change. So I decided to go on my own. And also doing all these other things, like experimenting with type design, lettering, shooting, it really got me going, and I wanted to try something else. And just design something that was not a 5x8 book cover. So it was really a scary move because, again, I had felt like I found my place, I got acquainted to it, and then I'm gonna go, you know? But it also felt like the right move, and I just decided to listen to my gut and go for it. And with freedom came brick walls and windows, which was awesome. This is my studio in Greenpoint now. And seriously, it was a great opportunity to explore other things. While I still do a lot of book covers, I'm still working with a lot of publishers, and as a freelancer, that's like the bulk of my work. I also get to do other things like silk screening and signage and calligraphy. And, you know, I got my first few projects as a type designer, which has been really exciting. And I was commissioned my first original typeface, and this is kind of like a secret project, but I'm showing it anyway, because I really like it. But yeah, it was really exciting because they asked me to create something that was kind of handwritten, somewhere connected, and it felt like someone had written down on a list, but they wanted it to be clean. So my approach to this was pretty different from what I had learned at Cooper Type, and instead of, you know, drawing by hand and then scanning and doing all the perfect drawing that I was telling you about, I decided to draw this directly on the computer. So I have a Cintiq, and I started by handwriting. I created a brush in Illustrator, so it was direct, like I started drawing vectors. And I had to clean up a little bit of the drawings, but because I already know where things should go, it was quite easy, and it allowed me to work in so much of a faster pace that I would usually do making a typeface. So it was pretty great. And from there, I was like, gosh, this was pretty clean, and I kind of want to try and do something that is not as clean, and it actually has a lot of texture from my own writing. So this is just like the basic handwriting style that I can do with a brush, and I like how quirky it is and that it's not perfect, and I wanted to take that into the computer and see how it worked. And it was just an experiment. I'm still working on it. It's a work in progress, but it's just so exciting when you actually have enough letters that you can start typing things. And coming from something so clean like the previous project, this was really a really great thing to try out. And I'm not sure if I will be ever releasing this, although Christine wants me to. But it was really cool because, you know, how can you try to reinvent that process is something that I'm asking myself constantly, in the sense that before, you know, I would have just drawn the shapes that I had in my head, but here it was like, I'm gonna take my brush, start from there, see what happens if I swap things out a little bit, and I think the results are really cool because it keeps changing all the time. Water break. And doing all of this, I also realized that I had so much time being on my own. It was great because I was managing my own time in the way that I wanted. I was taking my own projects so I could like organize myself and have extra time. So I went back into doing zines, which is something that I had kind of abandoned when I started full-time because, you know, I was fully immersed in that. And I bought a Riso printer with my studio mates, which has been amazing because I feel like it has the right amount of analog and digital to test things out quickly, but also has some quality similar to silkscreen. Not that silkscreen is much better, guys, but you know, it's close. And it's really cool because I feel like it's kind of like the baby between a Xerox machine and a silkscreen process, so you get like a middle ground that it's really great. And it's been really fun to create scenes and just experiment with different formats and shapes and products in general. So I started to do the zines, and that led me to making more goodies, which has been also really great. I went back to screen printing, so I've been doing some posters. I started making buttons. I launched a small line of patches. And it has been great to see these lettering pieces, you know, that once were so flat, now becoming kind of like a tangible item. And it has really been very exciting. So with this exploration, I realized I love being my own client. I love sharing my work with others and finding others' work. I've been going to a lot of Scene Fest, and it's been really fun to see people's work and discover it, and also when they come by and like read a zine and they crack up, it's just like amazing. And these days, it's hard for me to say I'm a graphic designer, but you know, it's typical that you get asked this question, what do you do? I'm a graphic designer, book cover designer, letterer, type design. I keep adding things, and you know, it's okay. I feel like even tomorrow, I don't know what I'll be doing, but I know that even now, 5 years from now, I'll be getting my hands dirty, either in analog or digital, and doing stuff, because that's what I love. And that's all I got for you guys. Thanks.
This is my eternal struggle as someone who makes things by hand. When you're like ready to work and you're like, oh, this is gonna take way too long. How do you decide like, okay, I'm gonna do this by hand, or I'm just gonna draw it on the iPad and make it look handmade and no one will know? Like,
I mean, like we were talking about this a little bit, and I have not really experienced the iPad too much.
Okay.
But digital. I know it's great. Yeah. But I have a Cintiq, so that's the one I do use every day. And I use it more for cleanup, unless I have to do, it has come to a point that I kind of know what I can do in a certain amount of time. So, you know, if I have a lot of time and I want to experiment, I usually tend to start a project by not knowing what I'm gonna do. And then I'm like, oh, I actually want to try to do some brush, different lettering with this and see what happens. So I'll pick and choose depending on the project. I feel like with the books, it's really about the relationship that you have with the story, which is, you know, really cool.
Yeah.
And then in the case of the zines, because it's so personal, it's more about what I want to try out. So, for example, one of my latest zines, I was like, I want to try drawing in the computer directly because I had done that project that I showed you guys, the typeface. And I was like, I want to try this for my own stuff and see what happens and what comes out of it. So I went and drew everything in the Cintiq, and it's kind of more about experimenting for me. So if I have a quick deadline, I will probably try to make my process as fast as possible, but in general, I want to pick the method that feels right to the project.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And you did mention that with the book covers, you have a lot more time to work on it, and
yeah, it's like I get a book and the manuscript, and I have a couple of weeks to turn in something. And I usually will send like 3 to 5 finished pieces, so it's just one image.
Yeah.
It's a lot of time.
Yeah,
if you're doing a multiple number of covers, you know, it can get hectic, but it's not like New York Times hectic 3 hours. It's like,
I needed it yesterday.
Yeah, those are the things that I would go say for, like, oh, I've already tried this. I know it'll take me, you know.
And it's very conceptual
hours.
too. So, okay, I'm checking. Like, tweet me, guys. Ew, I never thought I'd ever say that, but tweet me if you have any questions for Isabel. So what's next?
That's a great question. I honestly don't know, and I feel like the exciting thing about being on my own is that I don't know, and I'm like really open to.
Is there a dream project that you've been wanting to work on? Dream collaborator?
There have been like series of books that have not happened, like the Bolaño series that I did work on didn't end up happening. It got rejected by the publisher group and stuff, and I was like heartbroken.
Yeah.
That was the one that I was like, I got into Random House and I was like, this is the project that I want for my life. You know, if I do this, it's done.
It's done.
But yeah, that one was like, oh, goddamn. But it's okay.
Yeah.
Something else will come.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks, guys. That's all the time we have for.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.